Hi, I'm Manny, and I'm keeping on with all the artsy fartsy stuffery. I'm continuing to work on the grayscale shading for this lovely rendition of CL from Expedition 33, which funnily enough, she's not actually my favorite character. My favorite character is Verso for reasons that people might, find distasteful considering how that whole game goes. But anyway, putting that aside, I'm finally starting to do the hair, which was kind of a challenge because since the hair is supposed to be pretty much all shaded because it's a darker like chestnut brown, and it was hard to shade it in a way that would separate it from the shading on the rest of the face and all the other parts that the hair touch, because it can get a little bit muddled and visually confusing. That detail aside, the thing I really wanted to get into in this little art yappy session is that I have been struggling to grow as an artist for the longest time. And part of it is my own fault because I will just switch between styles and experiment with like ideas and stuff instead of like being more consistent and putting out more stuff that I like, and instead trying to like be what other artists are, at least in my eyes. But part of it is also the fact that now I don't blame anyone for this, but I don't get a lot of feedback, at least a lot of useful feedback, because when I show my art to like a friend or a fellow artist, they'll say, no, it looks good, or it looks fine, or I like it, but they won't necessarily like get really deep into it and tell me, oh, I like this detail, I don't like this for this reason. So I don't have much to go off of when it comes to improving or changing this particular style because people just tell me, it looks good. And that doesn't give me a lot to work with. Which is why, if these videos ever happen to actually gain an audience, like I'm just talking like maybe like 20 people, 30 people, I would really appreciate it if you went in the comments and like dove deep, like maybe try and keep it to one or two paragraphs, but like dive deep into what you like or don't like about my art style and why it works or doesn't work for you, because that will actually help me figure out again what works and what doesn't, and move my style in a way that not only helps it be more appealing to people, but helps me get more comfortable with it, because I do have the problem of looking at what other artists do and seeing how popular that is and thinking maybe I should do that instead of just sticking to my own creative vision. And speaking of my own creative vision, another thing I was thinking in terms of like altering my artistic process is actually removing the stage where I do the clean line art and just go with the rough sketch and basically make that a bit transparent, and then make a layer on top and just start shading it immediately and then just work with that as my base instead of having a whole extra step based around creating a clean line art with a whole separate brush that I have to configure and figure out. It would be a lot more expedient to just use the same pencil and do like a rough sketch and then just shade that and just keep working on that and like altering it so that it looks like a clean line art, but in reality, it's still like sketchy and rough. Now, I would have to start a whole new piece to try this, and I think I have one that I recently started that I'm not working on because I'm working on this one to try and get it done. So, with that, I might try that kind of process in order to see how it turns out. Another thing I would like a potential audience to help me with is ideas of how to integrate color into my sketchy, scribbly, grayscale shading to make it look more appealing as a colored piece. Because so far, because of what I mentioned before, that I don't get a lot of like good in-depth feedback, I'm just kind of floundering around in the dark and don't really know the appeal of the techniques I'm using. So if you could add that to the feedback you provide, if you choose to provide feedback, if you just watch or listen, that's fine too. But I just want to take the opportunity to gather some useful info to help me move my own aesthetic in a better direction. Because variety is the spice of life, right? Like it's good to get all sorts of, all sorts of styles from the art you consume or enjoy, because most of the stuff that I see online is your usual anime-esque soft rendering that's very like airbrushy. And me personally, I prefer painterly, scribbly, like really rough, like art that feels like it has texture to it, which is why I like this sort of scribbly look. But there, like, it's so overwhelming the amount of art that is successful that is just like, soft, airbrushy rendering, that when I come in with this particular art style, it can feel like I'm doing something that isn't as appealing, instead of it being just something that is different and needs time to gather an audience. Because the reason I really hone in on this particular style is because it started with the first time I watched Carl Kapinski do a demo for the Proco Art YouTube channel. And I loved his idea of, he likes taking traditional medium and creating an artifact, like an actual thing. And I loved his sketchbook tours and his sort of brushy style and his scribbly sketches that he does grayscale like watercolor shading on. And I love the tactile, imperfect feel of it that gives it a lot of life and gesture. And I wanted to sort of take that on board and make it my own in a way. And that's why I started experimenting with I just had got the pencil tool in Clip Studio Paint, and I messed around with it until it felt right and I could start using layers to create layers of shading and get this style going. But anyway, the video's about to end. Thanks for watching. Have a good one. I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.